He's unstable, a danger to himself and everyone around him. My wife's voice carried cleanly across courtroom 3B, calm and convincing. Behind her, my son took the stand and said he agreed that he believed I was a threat. His words cut deeper than hers ever could. I remained silent at the respondents' table accounts. Frozen career, suspended, already painted as incompetent. The judge didn't react. She studied me. Then her eyes settled on the burn scar across my hand. She leaned forward, voice measured. "Counselor, are you absolutely certain you understand who Mr. Holloway is?" Her attorney stiffened. My wife's face went pale. Because in that moment, something she never expected was about to surface. "Hello everyone and welcome. Before we begin, I'd like to ask a small favor if this story resonates with you. Please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Also, a quick note. This narrative includes creative elements designed for reflection and learning. Any similarities to specific names or places are unintended, but the lessons within are meant to stay with you. The worst part wasn't my wife's accusation. It was watching my son take the stand and say, "I believe my father is a danger to himself and others. He was 24 years old. I'd held him the day he was born at Fairfax Hospital. His tiny hand wrapped around my finger, his eyes barely open. I'd taught him to ride a bike on our street in McLean. I'd driven him to college move-in. Day helped him carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs in the August heat. And now he stood there in courtroom 3B of the Fairfax County Courthouse helping her destroy me. I sat at the respondent's table, hands folded flat against the oak surface. Years ago, I'd learned that clenched fists invite interpretation. Still hands don't. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the same institutional buzz you hear in every government building across America. The courtroom was smaller than people imagine, no dramatic gallery, no packed audience. Just worn wooden benches, the seal of the Commonwealth of Virginia mounted behind the judge's bench, and the faint smell of old paper and floor polish. My name is Gregory Holloway. I'm 57 years old. I've been married to Gabrielle for 26 years. We raised Julian together. We lived in a 4-bedroom colonial in McLean with a 2-car garage and a backyard where we used to grill on summer weekends. And until 3 weeks before this hearing on July 16th, no one had ever suggested out loud in writing or otherwise that I was incapable of managing my own life. Gabrielle stood a few feet from me, angled toward Judge Beverly Harrington. Navy blazer, neutral makeup, pearl necklace. She'd chosen this version of herself carefully. I recognized it because I'd lived with it for decades. This was Gabrielle at parent-teacher conferences. Gabrielle at charity events. Composed. Sympathetic. Reasonable. Her attorney, Ronald Briggs, had just finished outlining her petition. He'd described Gabrielle as a wife who had carried the financial and emotional responsibilities of our household for years. He'd described me as withdrawn, passive, chronically disengaged from long-term planning. He'd emphasized concern, stability, protection. Then Gabrielle spoke. "Your Honor, my husband doesn't understand finances. He never has." Her voice was steady, practiced. "He's become increasingly unstable, erratic. I'm afraid for him. I'm afraid for myself." She didn't look at me when she said it. I didn't react, not because it didn't hurt, but because reacting would serve her narrative. Gabrielle had always believed silence meant emptiness. She mistook restraint for absence. That misunderstanding was the foundation of everything that followed. Then Julian was called. I watched him walk to the witness stand. He wore a dress shirt I'd bought him last Christmas. Blue Oxford wrinkled at the collar. He avoided my eyes as he was sworn in. His hand shook slightly as he raised it. "Hunter Holloway," Briggs said. "Can you tell the court about your father's recent behavior?" Julian swallowed, looked at his mother, then spoke. "My father has always been distant, emotionally unavailable. But lately it's gotten worse. He doesn't answer calls. He forgets conversations. Heidi. Julian paused, and I saw something flicker across his face. Doubt maybe, or shame. He's been acting strange, paranoid almost. My mother has tried to help, but he refuses. Briggs nodded encouragingly. And do you believe your mother's concerns are valid? Julian's jaw tightened. Yes! Can you elaborate? There was a long pause. The courtroom waited. I could hear the clock ticking above the judge's bench. 9:14 in the morning. I believe my father is a danger to himself and others, Julian said. The words landed softly, but they landed. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not anger, not even surprise. Just a deep, hollow ache. The kind you feel when you lose something you thought was permanent. I kept my hands flat on the table. Didn't move. Didn't speak. Julian still wouldn't look at me. Judge Harrington had been quiet through most of this. She was in her mid-60s, silver hair, neatly cut reading glasses balanced low on her nose. She had the calm, economical presence of someone who'd heard thousands of stories and learned how to spot the seams where they didn't quite hold. She didn't look at Gabriel when Julian finished. She didn't look at Briggs. She looked at me. Her eyes moved slowly from my face to my hands, still resting on the table. And then they stopped. Lingered. On my right hand, where an old scar ran across the back, pale, faded, but visible. A burn scar from years ago, Judge Harrington's expression shifted. Just slightly. Her brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. She stared at that scar for what felt like a long time. Then something changed in her eyes. Not recognition exactly, but something close. A flicker of memory. A question forming. She glanced at Gabriel, then back at me, then at Briggs. And when she spoke, her voice was careful. Measured. Counselor. She said, "Are you certain you understand who Mr. Holloway is and what he actually does?" The question hung in the air. Briggs blinked. Your Honor, Mr. Holloway's professional background. Judge Harrington continued, her eyes still on me. Are you confident you've accurately represented it? Briggs hesitated, glanced at his notes. He works in risk management, Your Honor. Internal compliance. Judge Harrington nodded slowly, but her eyes didn't leave mine. And for just a moment, sitting in that courtroom with my son's words still echoing, and my wife's lies filling the room, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope, because Judge Beverly Harrington had just asked a question that meant she'd seen something. Something Gabriel and her lawyer hadn't prepared for. She'd seen my hand, the scar, and something about it had triggered a memory. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I knew one thing. This wasn't over. While my marriage was crumbling, someone was watching. Someone I had forgotten. Someone who had never forgotten me. At the time, I didn't know his name was Gavin Sinclair, but I learned it later when it was almost too late. I want to be clear about something. I didn't set out to ruin Gavin Sinclair's life. I didn't even dislike him. In May of 2018, when I was 51 and working as a compliance analyst at a mid-sized risk management firm in Tyson's Corner, Gavin was just another name in the employee database. 37 years old, operations manager, competent from what I could tell, quiet. My job was to review internal documentation for regulatory compliance. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was necessary. Companies get audited. Mistakes get expensive. My role was to catch those mistakes before they became lawsuits. That's how I found the discrepancy. A series of vendor invoices that didn't match the internal ledger. Small amounts at first, a few $100s here, 1,000 there. But over 18 months, it added up. Someone had been falsifying records. Someone had been redirecting funds. I traced the approvals back to Gavin. I didn't want to report him. I didn't know him well, but I knew what it would mean. Termination. Possible criminal charges. I spent a week double-checking my findings, hoping I had made a mistake. I hadn't. So I did what I was required to do. I filed a report with the compliance director. 2 days later, Gavin was fired. I didn't think about it much after that. I had done my job. The company handled the rest. I moved on to the next audit, the next set of reports. Gavin Sinclair became a name I filed away in the back of my mind and forgot. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known at the time, was what happened to Gavin after he left. I learned the details much later from Walter Harris, the private investigator I hired in the spring of 2024. Walter dug through court records, financial statements, old emails. He pieced together the story Gavin would never have told me himself. After Gavin was fired, his life unraveled. His wife divorced him within 6 months. She cited financial instability, breach of trust, the kind of language that shows up in custody filings. Gavin lost his kids. Not completely, but enough. Supervised visits once a month. Child support he couldn't always afford. He moved from a townhouse in Fairfax to a one-bedroom apartment in Arlington. He worked a series of low-paying jobs, warehouse shifts, delivery driving, anything that paid cash. And through it all, he blamed me. Not himself. Not the choices he had made. Me. Walter found an old journal entry Gavin had written 2 years after the firing. He had kept it in a storage unit, along with newspaper clippings about the company, about compliance regulations, about me. The entry was dated August 2020. It said, "Gregory Holloway destroyed my life. He didn't have to report it. He could have given me a chance. But he chose to ruin me. One day, he'll know what that feels like." I didn't see that journal until long after everything fell apart. At the time, May 2018, I didn't know Gavin was plotting anything. I didn't know he was keeping track of me, my career, my family. I didn't know he had started following my life the way someone tracks a target. For 6 years, Gavin waited. In February of 2023, Gavin Sinclair, now 41 years old, walked into a gym in Arlington. It was a popular spot, clean, affordable, frequented by young professionals. Gavin had joined a few weeks earlier. He worked out in the mornings, kept to himself, didn't draw attention, until the day my son Julian walked in. Julian was 23. He had graduated college the year before and was working an entry-level marketing job in Alexandria. He lived in a small apartment near Old Town, and the gym was on his way to work. He went 3, sometimes 4 times a week. Julian told me this months later after everything came out. He said Gavin had approached him at the bench press, offered to spot him. They started talking. Gavin was friendly, encouraging. He asked questions what Julian did for work, where he lived, whether he had family nearby. Julian mentioned his father worked in risk management. Gavin didn't flinch. He just smiled and said, "That's a solid field, must be proud of you." They kept running into each other. Gavin always seemed to be there at the same time Julian was. He gave Julian advice on workouts, on career moves, on life. He became a mentor, a friend. From the surveillance footage Walter found later, grainy security camera recordings from the gym, I could see Gavin's face the first time he approached my son. There was nothing friendly about it. It was calculation. Cold, patient calculation. But Julian didn't see that. Julian saw someone who listened, someone who cared. I learned all of this in pieces. Bank records. Text messages Julian turned over after everything collapsed. Security footage. Interviews Walter conducted with people who knew Gavin. It took months to assemble the full picture. But at the time, early 2023, I knew nothing. I didn't know that a man I had reported 6 years earlier was befriending my son. I didn't know that every conversation, every bit of advice was leading somewhere. Somewhere I wouldn't understand until it was almost too late. As I sat there in that courtroom, the judge's eyes still fixed on my hand, I felt time collapse. The fluorescent lights, the polished wooden benches, the hum of the air conditioning, all of it faded. I looked down at my own scarred palm, the raised tissue that had become so familiar, I barely noticed it anymore. Except in moments like this. Moments when the past refused to stay buried. I was back on Route 50, back in the rain. back when I was 39 years old, and my mother Lillian had just survived her first stroke. It was close to midnight mid-March in Virginia. The kind of night when the rain doesn't just fall, it attacks. My windshield wipers worked overtime, carving out brief, foggy glimpses of the empty two-lane highway ahead. I had left the hospital in Richmond 2 hours earlier, where my mother lay in a sterile room, half her face slack, her words garbled. The doctors said she would recover, mostly. But I had seen the fear in her eyes when she tried to speak and couldn't. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My mind was 1,000 miles away, thinking about how I would rearrange my schedule, how I would help her through rehab, how everything was about to change. I didn't see the car on the shoulder until I was almost past it. A dark sedan angled awkwardly into the grass, smoke rising from the crumpled hood. The driver's side door crushed inward like a tin can. I slowed, pulled over. Every instinct told me to keep driving. I had a mother in the hospital, I had work in the morning, I had no business getting involved. But my father's voice echoed in my head, the one lesson he drilled into me before he passed. You stop. You help. You don't walk away. I stepped out into the rain. It soaked through my coat in seconds. The air smelled of burnt rubber and something sharper, gasoline. My heart started hammering. Hello. I called, jogging toward the wreck. Is anyone in there? No answer. Just the hiss of the rain and the ticking of hot metal. I reached the passenger side, the only door that wasn't completely destroyed. Through the shattered window, I saw her. A young woman, maybe 18 or 19, slumped against the steering wheel, blood, a cut on her forehead. Her eyes fluttered, but didn't open. Hey, I said louder this time. Can you hear me? She groaned. Barely. The smoke was getting thicker. I didn't have time to think. I grabbed the door handle and yanked. It didn't budge. Yanked again. The metal groaned, finally giving way with a screech. That's when I smelled it. Not just gasoline burning gasoline. A thin line of flame crawling from the engine toward the undercarriage. My hands moved before my brain caught up. I reached in, fumbling with her seatbelt. The buckle was jammed. I pulled harder, twisting it, swearing under my breath. The heat was rising now, the flames licking closer. My left hand brushed against something, scorching the doorframe maybe, or a piece of exposed metal, and pain shot through my palm like a branding iron. I didn't let go. The seatbelt finally released. I hooked my arms under hers and pulled her out, stumbling backward as her weight collapsed against me. We hit the wet grass together, and I half dragged, half carried her away from the car. 20 feet. 30. My hand screamed in protest, but I kept moving. Behind us, the flames found the fuel line. The explosion wasn't like the movies. No fireball, no dramatic roar. Just a loud whoomp and a wave of heat that knocked me forward onto my knees. The girl rolled off my shoulder, coughing, her eyes finally opening. What? She started, her voice hoarse. That you're safe, I said, breathing hard. My hand throbbed, the skin already blistering. You're safe now. She stared at me, dazed, rainwater streaming down her face. Who? Sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights flickered through the trees. I have to go, I said, already backing toward my car. My mother, the hospital. I couldn't afford delays, couldn't afford questions. I glanced at the girl one more time. She was sitting up now, looking more confused than hurt. She would be okay. That was all that mattered. I got back in my car and drove. The next morning, the local paper ran a brief story. Teen survives fiery crash on Route 50. Family seeks Good Samaritan. I read it over coffee at the hospital cafeteria. The girl's name wasn't mentioned. Just that she had been pulled from the wreckage by an unknown man who left before police arrived. I folded the paper and looked at my bandaged hand. The doctors said it would scar. I didn't care. She lived. That was all that mattered. I never tried to find her, never reached out. What would I say? You're welcome. It felt unnecessary. Wrong, even. I had done what anyone should do. Nothing more. I never learned her name. I never knew she was the daughter of the woman who would one day sit across from me in a courtroom, holding my fate in her hands. And I never imagined that 18 years later, Judge Beverly Harrington would look at this scar and see the truth I had long forgotten. People always ask when a marriage ends. I can't point to a single moment. But if I had to choose, it was the night Gabrielle told me she would manage my mother's finances. I was 54 years old. She was 52. And I made the mistake of thinking her offer came from love. The first decade of our marriage had been good. Not perfect, no marriage is but good. We had Julian when I was 31, and for years we moved through life the way most couples do work. School pickups, family dinners, vacations to the Outer Banks. Gabrielle was organized, efficient, the kind of person who kept color-coded calendars and never missed a bill payment. I admired that about her. I still do in a way. But somewhere around the time Julian started college, things shifted. She stopped asking about my day. I stopped sharing. We became two people living parallel lives under the same roof. She said I was emotionally unavailable. I said she was controlling. We were both right. By the summer of 2021, we barely spoke unless it was about logistics. Julian's tuition, the mortgage, what to have for dinner. I convinced myself this was normal. Marriages evolve, I told myself. You don't need grand gestures or constant connection. You just need stability. So when Gabrielle started taking over the household finances, I didn't question it. She had always been better with money, more disciplined, more forward-thinking. I worked long hours in compliance and risk management, analyzing data, reviewing contracts. I was good at spotting problems in other people's systems. I didn't see the problems building in my own. It started small. She suggested consolidating our bank accounts. "It'll be easier," she said. "One place for everything." I agreed. Then she asked me to add her name to the savings account my father had left me. "Just in case something happens to you," she said. I signed the papers. Then she took over the investment portfolio. "You're too conservative," she said. "Let me handle it." I let her. I told myself it was trust. I told myself it was partnership. I told myself she was helping. I didn't see what I was really doing. I was stepping aside. I was making myself smaller. I was choosing silence over confrontation, because confrontation had never gone well. Gabrielle had a way of making me feel like I was the problem. Like my concerns were overreactions, my questions were accusations. So I stopped asking, Julian noticed. Or maybe he didn't. It's hard to say. By the time he turned 21, he had already started pulling away. He stopped calling me on Sundays, stopped asking for advice. When I tried to reach out, casual texts, invitations to lunch, he replied with short, polite messages. "Busy, Dad. Maybe next week." Next week never came. I told myself it was normal. Kids grow up. They create their own lives. But I saw the way he talked to Gabrielle, the way he laughed with her on the phone, the way he came home for Thanksgiving and spent the entire weekend in the kitchen with her, barely acknowledging me. I didn't blame him. I had become a ghost in my own house. By the spring of 2023, I was 56 years old and felt older. My mother, Lillian, was 74 and still living alone in the house I grew up in, a modest colonial in Alexandria. She was sharp, independent, the kind of woman who refused help even when she needed it. But in early October, she called me from the hospital. She had suffered a stroke, mild, the doctors said, but enough to shake her. Enough to make her realize she couldn't do everything alone anymore. I drove to the hospital that night, my hands tight on the steering wheel, my mind racing. What if it had been worse? What if she had been alone when it happened? What if Gabrielle met me there? I hadn't asked her to come, but she did. She sat beside me in the waiting room, her hand on my knee, her voice calm and steady. "It's going to be okay," she said. "But we'll figure this out." When the doctor finally let us see my mother, Gabrielle took charge. She asked about recovery timelines, medication schedules, follow-up appointments. She spoke with the same efficiency she used to manage our household finances, and I felt a strange mix of gratitude and relief. Later that night, as we sat in the hospital cafeteria over cold coffee, Gabriel said, "Your mother can't manage everything on her own anymore. Let me help." I looked at her. "Help how?" "Financially," she said. "Bills, accounts, insurance, whatever she needs. You're already stretched thin with work. Let me take care of it." I hesitated. My mother was proud. She wouldn't want someone else handling her affairs. But Gabrielle's offer made sense. She was organized, she was capable, and I was tired. "Are you sure?" I asked. She smiled. "Of course. That's what family does." I nodded. "Okay. Thank you." A week later, my mother signed a power of attorney granting Gabriel access to her accounts. I was there when she signed it, her hand still trembling slightly from the stroke. Gabrielle reassured her. "This is just to make things easier, Lillian. You won't have to worry about anything." My mother looked at me. "You trust her?" "I do," I said, and I did. At the time, I believed I was doing the right thing. I believed I was protecting my mother. I believed Gabrielle was acting out of kindness. I watched her carry my mother's financial files to the car that day, and I thought, I'm lucky to have someone who cares this much. I thought I was keeping the peace. I thought I was being a good husband by trusting her. I didn't realize I was handing her the tools she needed to dismantle everything I had built. And I certainly didn't know that someone else was watching from the shadows, someone who had been waiting 8 years for exactly this moment. I didn't know my son had a gambling problem until it was too late. Maybe if I had asked more questions. Maybe if I had been less silent. But by the time I realized Julian was in trouble, Gavin had already wrapped his claws around him. Julian confessed everything to me in August of 2024, almost 2 years after it began. We sat in my lawyer's office. Elena Rodriguez was there taking notes, and my son, 24 years old by then, finally broke. He cried, not the kind of crying I had seen when he was a child and scraped his knee. This was different. This was shame. "It started small, Dad," he said. I swear it did. According to Julian, it began in August of 2022. He was 22 years old, fresh out of college, working his first real job in marketing. The pay was decent, but not great. He lived in a small apartment in Alexandria, splitting rent with a roommate. He was trying to prove himself to his employer, to his mother, maybe to me, though I doubt he would have admitted that. One of his co-workers introduced him to an online betting site. Sports, mostly. Football, basketball, a few international soccer matches. Julian said it felt harmless at first. $10 here, 20 there. Just for fun. Something to do while watching games on Sunday afternoons. Then he won. Not a lot, maybe $150, but enough to make him think he was good at it. Enough to make him want to try again. Within 3 months, he was betting every weekend. Within 6 months, he was betting during the week. He started chasing losses, doubling down, convincing himself the next bet would be the one that evened everything out. By February of 2023, Julian owed $50,000. He didn't tell me this at the time. I didn't see the signs. Or maybe I saw them and convinced myself they were something else. He looked tired when I saw him, dark circles under his eyes, a tightness in his jaw. I asked him once if everything was okay. He said yes. I believed him because it was easier than pressing. Julian told me he tried to fix it on his own. He cut back on spending, picked up freelance work on the side, even considered selling his car. But the interest kept piling up. The betting sites didn't care if he couldn't pay. They just kept sending reminders, warnings, threats to report the debt to collections. He felt trapped, ashamed, desperate. That's when Gavin found him. I didn't know this at the time, but Gavin had been watching Julian for weeks before they officially met at the gym in Arlington. Walter Harris uncovered this later security footage showing Gavin sitting in his car outside Julian's apartment, checking the gym schedule, timing his visits to match Julian's. It wasn't a coincidence. It was strategy. When Gavin approached Julian at the bench press in February of 2023, he didn't mention gambling. He didn't mention debt. He just asked how Julian's workout was going, offered to spot him, made small talk about jobs, stress life. Over the next few weeks, they kept running into each other. Gavin was friendly, encouraging. He asked questions but never pried. He gave advice but never judged. Julian said Gavin felt like someone who actually understood, someone who didn't expect perfection. "He seemed to get it, Dad," Julian told me months later, his voice breaking. "He didn't judge me." One day, after a particularly brutal workout, Gavin suggested they grab coffee. Julian agreed. They sat in a small cafe on Columbia Pike, and Gavin asked how things were really going. Julian, exhausted and overwhelmed, let his guard down. He mentioned work, stress, money issues. He didn't say the word gambling, but Gavin must have seen the opening. "Money problems are temporary," Gavin said, according to Julian. "You just need the right plan." Over the next few weeks, Gavin became Julian's mentor. He suggested ways to budget, ways to negotiate with creditors. He offered small loans, $200 here, $500 there, to help Julian get through the month. Julian felt grateful, relieved. He thought he had found a friend. Then, in late March of 2023, Gavin asked Julian a question. "Your dad has money, right?" Julian hesitated. "I guess. I mean, he's comfortable." Gavin nodded, thoughtful. "And your grandmother? She had assets." "Yeah. My dad's been helping her manage things since she had a stroke." Gavin leaned back in his chair, casual. "Has your dad ever talked about setting up a conservatorship, to protect her assets in case something happens?" Julian didn't understand where Gavin was going. He said no, his dad hadn't mentioned anything like that. Gavin smiled. "It's pretty standard, actually, especially for older people who can't manage their own finances. A family member files a petition, the court reviews it, and then the assets are protected. Sometimes the person managing the conservatorship can access funds to help the family. Legally." Julian still didn't see it. He thought Gavin was just making conversation. "What if," Gavin said slowly, "your dad's finances were part of that conservatorship? What if you had a legal way to access those funds just temporarily, just enough to clear your debt?" Julian told me he felt sick when Gavin said it, but he also felt hope, because Gavin made it sound simple. Legal, temporary. Just a conservatorship petition. Just enough to wipe out the $50,000. Then everything would go back to normal. "I didn't think it would go this far, Dad," Julian said, tears streaming down his face. "I swear I didn't. At the time, early 2023, I saw none of this. I saw my son pulling away, becoming more distant. I tried to reach out. Julian," I said one evening over the phone. "You okay? You seem distant." "I'm fine, Dad," he said. "Just busy. I didn't push. I thought he was growing up, building his own life. I thought giving him space was the right thing to do. I should have pushed harder. I should have seen the signs." Julian told me all of this months later in August of 2024, when guilt finally shattered fear. He told me how Gavin made it sound so simple, just a temporary conservatorship, just enough to clear the debt. He said he never thought it would go this far. But by then, it already had. Gabrielle met Gavin at a charity gala in May of 2023. At least that's what she told me. I didn't know then that the meeting wasn't accidental. I learned later from Walter's investigation that Gavin had researched her, studied her, knew exactly what to say to make her feel understood. The event was held at a hotel in McLean, one of those polished affairs where people in expensive suits sipped wine and wrote checks for causes they would forget by morning. Gabrielle had gone alone. I was working late as usual. She said she didn't mind. She was used to going to these things without me. Walter found the guest list months later buried in event records. Gavin Sinclair's name shouldn't have been there. He didn't work for the company hosting the gala. He didn't have a connection to the charity. He had purchased a ticket at the last-minute cash transaction, no email trail. He went there for one reason: to meet my wife. According to the hotel staff Walter interviewed later, Gavin approached Gabrielle near the bar. He complimented her dress, asked if she was enjoying the evening. She smiled. They talked. He was charming, attentive, the kind of person who makes you feel like you're the only one in the room. I learned all of this from Walter's report. From the text messages he recovered from Gabrielle's phone after everything fell apart. From the timeline he pieced together using credit card receipts, phone records, surveillance footage from parking garages. I didn't see any of it at the time. I was too busy working, too busy trying to keep everything afloat, too busy not noticing that my wife had already drifted too far to reach. The messages Walter recovered painted a clear picture. Gavin didn't rush. He didn't push. He waited. Let Gabrielle come to him. After the gala, he sent her a text. "It was nice meeting you tonight. You have a rare kind of presence, calm but strong. I hope we can talk again," she replied the next day. "Thank you. That's kind of you to say." They texted back and forth for a few weeks. Casual at first. Coffee recommendations, book suggestions, observations about work, stress life. Then Gavin started asking more personal questions. How long had she been married? Was she happy? Gabrielle didn't answer that question directly. But she didn't need to. Her silence said enough. By mid-June, they were meeting in person. Coffee at first, then lunch. Gavin listened. He asked questions. He made her feel seen in a way I apparently hadn't in years. One message read, "You deserve more than silence." Another, "You give so much to everyone else. Who takes care of you?" I read those messages months later sitting in Walter's office, and I felt sick. Not because they were lies, because they weren't. Gavin had identified exactly what Gabrielle wanted to hear. He had studied her weaknesses the way I used to study compliance reports, methodically, carefully looking for gaps. And he exploited them. By August of 2023, the affair had begun. Bank records showed hotel charges, credit card receipts, twice a week, sometimes 3 times. Always during the day when I was at work. Always at hotels far enough from our neighborhood that no one we knew would see. At the time, I didn't notice. Or maybe I did, and I told myself it was something else. Gabrielle started coming home later. She said she was helping a friend with financial planning, volunteering at a nonprofit. I believed her because I wanted to. Because doubting her meant admitting something I wasn't ready to face. I tried once to reconnect. It was late July, and we were eating dinner in silence again. I set down my fork and said, "Maybe we should take a trip. Just the two of us. Get away for a weekend." She didn't even look up. "I'm busy, Gregory." "When aren't you busy?" I said, trying to keep my tone light. She sighed. "I don't have time for this right now." That was the end of the conversation. I told myself she was stressed, that she needed space, that things would get better once the stress with my mother's care settled down. I didn't know Gavin was planting seeds, slowly, deliberately convincing Gabrielle that I didn't appreciate her, that I took her for granted, that she deserved better. From the text messages Walter recovered, I saw how Gavin played it. He never outright told Gabrielle to leave me. He just asked questions. Does he ever thank you for everything you do? When was the last time he really listened to you? Do you think he even notices how much you sacrifice? And Gabrielle, tired and lonely, and convinced I didn't care, answered the way Gavin knew she would. By the end of August, Gavin had her exactly where he wanted her. Emotionally vulnerable. Financially involved, she was managing my mother's accounts by then, and convinced that I was the problem. I thought she was stressed. I thought she needed space. I didn't realize she was being guided toward something far worse. I didn't learn about Gavin until August of 2024, when Walter showed me the photos. I didn't know that while I was working late, trying to provide for a family that was slipping through my fingers. Something was happening behind my back, something I wouldn't understand for months, until Wendy Harrington presented the evidence in that courtroom. While Gabrielle and Gavin were weaving their web, though I didn't know it yet, my mother's health began to decline. It started on a Tuesday morning in October of 2023. I was 56 years old. My mother was 74. And I was about to make a decision I would regret for the rest of my life. The call came at 9:30 in the morning. I was at my desk reviewing a compliance report when my phone rang. It was Mrs. Reynolds, my mother's neighbor in Alexandria. Her voice was calm but urgent. "Gregory, your mother had a fall. The paramedics are here. She's conscious, but she's confused. You should come." I left immediately. The drive from Tyson's Corner to Alexandria took 40 minutes in traffic. By the time I arrived, my mother was sitting on her couch, wrapped in a blanket, a paramedic checking her blood pressure. She looked small, fragile, older than I remembered. "Gregory," she said when she saw me. Her voice was soft, uncertain. "What happened?" "You had a fall, Mom," I said, sitting beside her. "But you're okay now." The paramedic explained that she had suffered a minor stroke. Not as severe as the one she'd had the year before, but enough to leave her disoriented. They recommended a hospital stay for observation. My mother refused. "I want to stay home," she said, her voice firmer now. "I'm fine. I just need to rest." I didn't argue. I stayed with her that night, sleeping on the couch, waking every few hours to check on her. By morning, she seemed better, more alert. But something had shifted. She moved slower, spoke quieter. The sharpness I had always associated with her was dulled. Gabrielle came by the next day. She brought soup, fresh flowers, a new blanket. She sat with my mother, holding her hand, speaking in that calm, soothing voice she used when she wanted to seem caring. "Lillian," she said, "you don't need to worry about anything. Gregory and I will take care of everything. Bills, appointments, whatever you need." My mother nodded, grateful. "Thank you, dear." Later, as we were leaving, Gabrielle turned to me. "I can handle her paperwork, Gregory. The financial stuff. You're already stretched thin with work. Let me take care of it." I hesitated. My mother had always been fiercely independent. She wouldn't want someone else managing her affairs. But Gabrielle's offer made sense. I was working long hours, I was exhausted, and my mother needed help. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Of course," Gabrielle said. "That's what family does." I nodded. "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." Over the next few months, Gabrielle became my mother's primary contact with the bank, the insurance company, the medical billing office. She handled everything efficiently, keeping me updated with brief summaries. I was grateful, relieved. My mother, however, seemed uneasy. In November, during one of my visits, she asked, "Gregory, dear, does Gabrielle really need to know about all my accounts?" "Oh, she's just helping Mom," I said. "You don't need to worry about anything." My mother frowned. "She asks a lot of questions, about savings, about the house. She's being thorough," I said. "That's a good thing." My mother didn't press further. She never wanted to be a burden. She never wanted to cause trouble. But in January, she mentioned it again. "Gregory, I don't think I signed anything about the bank accounts. Did I?" "I don't think so, Mom. Why?" "Well, Gabrielle said I did. She showed me some papers, but I don't remember." I told myself my mother was confused. The strokes had affected her memory. Gabrielle was handling everything properly. There was no reason to doubt her. In March of 2024, Gabrielle brought my mother a power of attorney document. I wasn't there, I was at work. Gabrielle later told me my mother had asked for it, that she wanted to make sure someone could handle her affairs if something happened. I believed her. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't learn until months later from Walter's investigation, was that my mother had been confused that day. Disoriented, Gabrielle had placed the document in front of her, guided her hand, told her it was just a formality. My mother signed with a trembling hand. She didn't fully understand what she was agreeing to. By June, my mother's health had deteriorated rapidly. She was weaker, sleeping more, eating less. The doctors said it was natural decline. There was nothing more they could do. I visited every day after work, sitting beside her bed, holding her hand, telling her stories about Julian, about work, about anything that might make her smile. On June 25, 2024, my mother passed away. I was with her. So was Gabrielle. My mother's breathing had grown shallow throughout the day, and by evening it stopped. Peaceful, quiet. I sat there for a long time, holding her hand, unable to move. Gabrielle stood behind me, her hand on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Gregory," she said softly. I nodded, unable to speak. Over the next few days, Gabrielle handled everything. The funeral arrangements, the obituary, the notifications to family and friends. She was efficient, organized, compassionate. I was too grief-stricken to do much of anything. I let her take charge. At least she's helping, I thought. At least I'm not alone. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known at the time, was that my mother had been trying to tell me something. She had left clues, questions about paperwork, concerns about Gabrielle's frequent visits. But I had been too busy, too trusting, too unwilling to see what was right in front of me. By the time I understood what she had been trying to say, she was gone. But she had left something behind. Something that would save me. As Gabrielle tightened her grip on my mother's finances, another campaign began, one aimed directly at me. The first time Gavin came for me, I didn't even know it was him. It was February of 2024. Anonymous emails. Whispers at work. I thought it was office politics. I didn't realize it was personal. The email arrived on a Monday morning. I didn't see it. It went to HR, to Rebecca Norton, the woman who handled employee relations. She called me into her office that afternoon. She said, her tone careful. "We received a concern about your behavior." I blinked. My behavior? She slid a printed email across the desk. It was anonymous, sent from a burner account. The subject line read, "Concern about employee stability." The body was brief. "I work with Gregory Holloway. Over the past few weeks, his behavior has been erratic. He seems distracted, irritable, and has made concerning comments about stress and family issues. I'm worried he may be a risk to himself or others. I'm reporting this anonymously because I don't want retaliation." I stared at the email, my heart pounding. "This isn't true. I haven't said anything like this. I don't even know who sent this." Rebecca nodded. "I understand, but we have to follow protocol. We'll need to conduct a brief investigation. It's standard procedure." Over the next 2 weeks, Rebecca interviewed several co-workers. Most said nothing unusual, but a few people I barely knew mentioned that I seemed stressed or withdrawn. One person said I had snapped at them in a meeting. I didn't remember snapping. I didn't even remember the meeting. Stanley Crawford. My mentor, the man who had guided me through 20 years of compliance work, stopped inviting me to lunch. When I asked him why, he said, "I just think you need space, Gregory. You seem like you're dealing with a lot." I was confused, hurt. I didn't understand what was happening. Rebecca closed the investigation with no findings. But the damage was done. People looked at me differently, whispered when I walked by. I became the subject of office rumors I couldn't control. I thought it was bad luck, a misunderstanding. I didn't realize it was the first move in a larger strategy. The second attack came 3 months later in May. I was at home when my phone rang. It was my bank. "Mr. Holloway, we're calling about some unusual activity on your account. We need to verify a few transactions." My stomach dropped. "What kind of transactions?" "Several large wire transfers over the past 2 weeks. They're flagged because they're outside your normal spending patterns. Did you authorize transfers totaling $23,000 to an account in Maryland?" No idea, I said, my voice tight. I didn't authorize anything. The bank representative walked me through the details. The transfers had been made using my account information. Whoever did it had access to my login credentials, my security questions, everything. We'll freeze the account and start an investigation, the representative said. But you'll need to file a report. I did. I spent hours on the phone with the bank's fraud department with my own IT team at work, trying to figure out how someone had gained access to my accounts. No one had answers. 2 days later, my company's compliance director called me into his office. Gregory, we need to put you on administrative leave. What, why? The bank contacted us. There's an ongoing investigation into unauthorized transactions linked to your accounts. Until it's resolved, we can't have you working on sensitive financial data. It's a conflict of interest. I felt the room tilt. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not saying you did, but this is protocol. You'll still receive pay. We just need you to step back until everything is cleared up. I left the office that day in a daze. I sat in my car in the parking garage, staring at the steering wheel, trying to piece it together. This wasn't random. Someone was targeting me. But who and why? The third attack was the worst. It happened on July 2nd, a Tuesday evening. I had stayed late at the office. Even though I was on leave, I had come in to pick up some personal files. The parking garage was nearly empty. My footsteps echoed as I walked toward my car. I didn't hear him until it was too late. Someone grabbed me from behind, shoving me hard against the concrete pillar. I stumbled, my shoulder slamming into the rough surface. I spun around, trying to see who it was, but the lighting was dim, and the figure was already moving away, disappearing into the shadows. I stood there, breathing hard, pain radiating through my shoulder and ribs. My face stung. I touched my cheek and felt wetness, blood from a cut above my eyebrow. I should have called the police. I should have reported it. But something stopped me. This was a trap. Whoever was behind this wanted me to react. They wanted me to look unstable, violent, out of control. If I filed a report, it would be more evidence against me. More whispers, more investigations. So I didn't call anyone. I drove home, my hands shaking on the wheel, my face throbbing. When I walked in the door, Gabrielle was in the kitchen. She looked up, her eyes widening. Gregory, what happened? I got into an altercation in the parking garage. I said, keeping my voice steady. It's fine. I'm fine. She walked over, examining my face. You need to clean that up. Sit down. She got the first aid kit, dabbed at the cut with antiseptic, applied a bandage. Her movements were efficient, clinical. I watched her face, looking for concern, for worry, but what I saw instead was something else. Something that looked almost like satisfaction. Let me take a picture, she said, pulling out her phone. For medical records? I didn't argue. I sat there exhausted while she photographed my bruised face, my cut eyebrow, the marks on my arms. A week later, I would learn that Gabrielle had already shared those photos. With her lawyer. With Julian. With anyone who would listen. She used them as evidence that I was unstable, that I was getting into fights, that I was a danger to myself and others. But I didn't know that yet. On that night, I just sat there numb, trying to understand what was happening to me. I sat in the darkness of the parking garage after the attack, tasting blood on my lip, and I knew. Someone was systematically dismantling my life, but I didn't know who. I didn't know why. I only knew one thing: silence wouldn't protect me anymore. For the first time in years, I realized I needed to act. The question was, what could I do when I didn't even know who my enemy was? The petition arrived on a Monday morning, July the 16th, 2024. I was 57 years old. Emergency conservatorship request. I read the words 3 times before they made sense. My wife was asking the court to declare me incapable of managing my own life. The courier knocked at 10 in the morning. I signed for the envelope thinking it was work-related, some compliance document that needed my review. But when I opened it, I saw Gabriel's name at the top. Petitioner Gabriel Holloway. Respondent Gregory Holloway. I sat down at the kitchen table and read. The petition was 12 pages long. It accused me of abusive behavior, mental instability, financial incompetence. It cited evidence: the injuries from the parking garage attack, the anonymous HR complaint, the suspicious bank transactions, the administrative leave from work. Every piece of ammunition that had been used against me over the past 6 months was here compiled into a legal document, presented as proof that I was a danger to myself and others. The petition requested emergency conservatorship. If granted, Gabrielle would have full control over my finances, my medical decisions, my legal affairs. I would lose the right to manage my own bank accounts. I would need her permission to make any significant decision about my life. I sat there staring at the pages, my hands trembling. This wasn't just a divorce. This was something far worse. This was an attempt to erase me. Within 48 hours, everything fell apart. On Wednesday, July 18th, my bank called. My accounts had been frozen pending the court's review. I couldn't access my savings, couldn't pay bills, couldn't withdraw cash. The bank representative was apologetic, but firm. "It's a court order, Mr. Holloway. There's nothing we can do until the hearing." On Thursday, July 19th, I received an email from my company. My administrative leave had been extended indefinitely. Given the ongoing legal proceedings, the email said, "We believe it's in everyone's best interest for you to step back until the matter is resolved." I called Rebecca Norton in HR. She was sympathetic, but distant. "Gregory, I'm sorry, but with a conservatorship petition, we can't have you working on sensitive financial data. It's a liability issue. One of this petition is based on lies." I said, my voice tight. "I'm not unstable, I'm not dangerous. Someone is setting me up." "I understand," she said. "But until the court rules otherwise, our hands are tied." I hung up and sat in silence. My career, 25 years of compliance work, of building a reputation, of earning trust, was gone. Just like that. That evening, I confronted Gabrielle. She was in the living room, reading a book. She didn't look up when I walked in. "Gabrielle," I said, my voice steady. "What is this?" She finally looked at me. Her expression was calm, cold. "It's for your own good, Gregory. You're not well." I'm not well," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I'm being framed. Someone is targeting me and you're helping them." She closed her book and stood. "That's exactly what someone who's unstable would say." I stared at her. "You don't believe that?" "I believe the evidence," she said. "The emails, the bank fraud, the fights. You've been spiraling, Gregory. You just can't see it. I didn't do any of those things." "Well, then who did?" she asked, her tone mocking. "Some invisible enemy, some conspiracy." I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Because I didn't have an answer. I didn't know who was behind this. I only knew it was real. Gabrielle picked up her book and walked toward the stairs. "The hearing is in 3 weeks. I suggest you get a lawyer." She left me standing there alone in my own living room, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The next morning, I tried to talk to Julian. He was in the hallway, putting on his jacket, preparing to leave. I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Hi, Julian," I said. "Son, do you really believe this?" He didn't meet my eyes. He looked past me at the door as if I wasn't even there. "Julian," I said again, my voice breaking. "Please, look at me." He finally looked up. His face was blank, emotionless. "Mom knows what's best, Dad." "She's lying," I said. "I didn't do the things she's accusing me of. Someone is setting me up." "You have to believe me." Julian's jaw tightened. "You always say that. You always blame someone else. But maybe it's just you, Dad. Maybe you're the problem." He stepped around me and walked out the door. I stood there frozen, feeling the weight of his words settle over me like a heavy blanket. My son didn't believe me. My wife had turned against me. My career was gone. My accounts were frozen. And in 3 weeks, a judge would decide whether I was capable of managing my own life. I had never felt more alone. That night, I slept in my car in the driveway. Not because Gabrielle had asked me to leave, but because I couldn't stay in a house where my own family had turned their backs on me. And as I sat there in the darkness, watching the lights go out one by one, I made a decision. I would fight. But not the way they expected. I would be silent as I always had been. But this time my silence would have teeth. I went to my mother's house on July 30th, 10 days before the hearing. The house in Alexandria stood empty now, waiting to be sold. I told myself I was there to look for financial records, but what I found was far more valuable proof that she had seen it all coming. The evening was dark and damp rain misting the windshield as I pulled into the driveway. The house looked smaller than I remembered, quieter. My mother's car was gone, sold weeks ago. The garden she had tended for 40 years was overgrown, the flowers wilting in the summer heat. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The air smelled stale. Dust had settled on the furniture, the bookshelves, the framed photographs lining the hallway. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, feeling the weight of her absence. I hadn't been back since the funeral. I couldn't. Every corner of this house held a memory, her laughter, her voice, the way she hummed while cooking dinner. Being here without her felt wrong, but I didn't have a choice. I needed financial records, bank statements, anything that might help me prove Gabrielle had overstepped her authority. I walked to my mother's small home office, a converted bedroom at the back of the house. Her filing cabinet stood against the wall, its drawers labeled in her neat handwriting, taxes, insurance, medical, legal. I opened the legal drawer and started sifting through papers. Deeds, wills, old contracts. And then I found it. The power of attorney. It was dated March 15th, 2024. I recognized my mother's signature at the bottom, shaky, uneven, nothing like the confident script she had used all her life. The handwriting alone told the story. She had signed this on a bad day, a confused day. I checked the medical records I had brought with me. March 15th. The doctor's notes read, patient experiencing increased confusion, short-term memory impairment, not recommended for legal decision-making. Gabrielle had brought this document to my mother on one of her worst days. And my mother, too, tired and disoriented to resist, had signed. I felt anger rise in my chest, hot and sharp, but I forced it down. Anger wouldn't help. Evidence would. I kept searching. In the bedroom closet, buried beneath old sweaters and blankets, I found the journal. It was small, leather-bound, with a brown cover worn smooth by years of handling. I recognized it immediately. My mother had kept journals for as long as I could remember. She wrote every night before bed, observations about the day, thoughts about family, reflections on life. I sat on the floor and opened it. The first entry I read was dated February 23, 2024. A foggy day. Gabrielle brought papers today. Said they were to help her talk to the bank about my accounts. I signed them. I shouldn't have. Too tired to argue. I turned the page. A better day, reviewed the papers, power of attorney. I didn't mean to give that kind of authority. Feel embarrassed. Don't want to bother Gregory. March 10th. Gabrielle came again. Asked about savings accounts. Asked about the house. She smiled, but something felt wrong. I didn't say anything. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. March 16th. I signed something yesterday. I think. My memory is so bad now. I hope I didn't make a mistake. June 20th, just 5 days before she passed. Gregory, if you're reading this, it means something bad has happened. I haven't forgotten who you are. I know what you do. I trust you to see what I couldn't. Don't let silence become your prison. The truth is here, use it. I stared at the page, my hands trembling. She had known. Even at the end, even through the confusion and the pain, she had known something was wrong. And she had left me a trail. I kept searching. There had to be more. In a box of old photographs, I found a small voice recorder. It was the kind my mother used to use for grocery lists, reminders, things she wanted to remember. I turned it on. The recording was dated March 15th, 2024, the same day as the power of attorney. I pressed play. At first there was only static. Then I heard my mother's voice, weak and uncertain. I don't understand. Why do you need this? Then Gabrielle's voice, calm and patient. Just trust me, Lillian. It's for Gregory's benefit. If you don't sign, it'll cause problems for him. But I don't. I'm very confused today. Can we wait? No, we can't wait. The bank needs it today. A pause. Then the sound of paper rustling. My mother's shaky breath. Okay, if it helps Gregory. The recording ended. I sat there on the floor, clutching the recorder, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I cried. Not quiet tears, not restrained grief. I cried the way I should have cried at her funeral, the way I should have cried when I first read the petition. I cried because my mother had tried to protect me even when she couldn't protect herself. She had known. She had seen Gabrielle's manipulation. She had documented it, and she had trusted that I would find it. I stayed in that house until dawn, listening to the recording over and over, reading through the journal entries, piecing together the timeline. My mother had been coherent enough to know something was wrong. She had been strong enough to leave me the tools I needed to fight back. Gabrielle had used her confusion, her vulnerability, her trust. But my mother had been smarter than Gabrielle realized. She had left a trail, a gift, and now I had it. I sat there until the first light of morning filtered through the windows, the recorder in one hand, the journal in the other. She had known. She had prepared. She had believed I would find this, and now I understood my silence had protected her evidence. But it was time for that evidence to speak. I had 9 days until the hearing. 9 days to build a case, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I had hope. I hired Gordon Sutton on Wednesday afternoon, July 31st. He came recommended by a colleague, someone I had trusted for years. Gordon looked confident, energetic. He promised to bring me justice. I paid the retainer. I gave him everything, the journal, the recording, my mother's medical records. I trusted him. That was my second mistake. Gordon's office was in Tyson's Corner, a sleek glass building with polished floors and modern furniture. I sat across from him in a leather chair, my hands gripping the armrests, trying to steady my nerves. "Tell me everything," Gordon said, leaning back in his chair, his pen poised over a legal pad. I did. I told him about Gabrielle taking control of my mother's finances, about the power of attorney signed on a day when my mother was barely coherent, about the conservatorship petition, the frozen accounts, the attacks on my reputation. I laid out the timeline piece by piece and watched Gordon's expression shift from neutral to engaged. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "This is strong evidence, Mr. Holloway. Elder abuse, exploitation of a vulnerable victim. We have a solid case." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Can we win?" Gordon smiled. "I'll do everything I can, but I need you to trust me." "Can you do that?" I nodded. "Yes." He extended his hand. "Then let's get to work." I paid the retainer $10,000, nearly everything I had left after the account freeze. Gordon assured me it was worth it. He would prepare a motion to dismiss the conservatorship petition. He would file a counter-complaint alleging fraud and elder abuse. He would build a case that would expose Gabrielle's actions. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Finally, someone was on my side. Finally, I wasn't alone. Later that afternoon, Gordon introduced me to Walter Harris. We met at a small coffee shop in Arlington. Walter was in his early 50s with graying hair, sharp eyes, and the kind of steady presence that made you feel like he had seen everything. He wore a plain jacket and jeans, nothing flashy, nothing that drew attention. "I've known Gordon for years," Walter said, shaking my hand. "If he trusts you, I trust you. What do you need?" "I need to know who's behind this," I said. "My wife isn't doing this alone. Someone is pulling the strings." Walter nodded. "Give me 2 days. I'll find out." He asked for details: Gabrielle's schedule, her phone number, her car. I gave him everything I could remember. He took notes in a small leather notebook, his handwriting quick and precise. "Now, one more thing," he said, looking up. "If I find something you don't want to know, do you still want me to tell you?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes." Walter stood. "I'll be in touch." The next morning, August 1st, I called Adult Protective Services. The woman on the other end of the line was calm, professional. Her name was Carol Henderson. I explained the situation: my mother's power of attorney, the suspicious transactions, the recording. Carol listened without interrupting. "We'll open an investigation," she said when I finished. "Thank you for reporting this, Mr. Holloway. It takes courage to come forward." I hung up and sat in silence. The systems were working. I wasn't alone anymore. I had a lawyer. I had an investigator. I had APS looking into Gabrielle's actions. For the first time in months, I felt like I had a chance. That afternoon, Walter called. I was at home, sitting in the kitchen, reviewing the timeline Gordon had asked me to prepare. My phone buzzed. Walter's name appeared on the screen. "Gregory," he said, his tone careful. "I found something. Your wife is meeting someone, frequently." I gripped the phone tighter. "Who?" Walter paused. I could hear the rustle of papers on the other end. "His name is Gavin Sinclair." I wrote it down in my notebook. Gavin Sinclair. The name meant nothing to me. "Who is he?" I asked. "That's what I need to find out," Walter said. "But Gregory, I think you should see the photo I'm sending you now." My phone buzzed. I opened the message. The photo showed a man in his early 40s standing outside a coffee shop. He was tall, clean-cut, with dark hair and a confident posture. He looked familiar. Not in a way I could place, just something about his face, something that tugged at the back of my mind. "Do you recognize him?" Walter asked. I stared at the photo. "I don't know. Maybe. I feel like I've seen him before." "Think about it," Walter said. "And in the meantime, I'll dig deeper. I'll have more for you tomorrow." He hung up. I sat there staring at the photo, trying to remember. Where had I seen this man? At work. At a company event, in passing somewhere. The harder I tried to remember, the more elusive it became. But something about his face, something about the way he stood, set off an alarm in the back of my mind. I didn't know it yet, but I was staring at the man who had orchestrated everything. The man who had befriended my son, seduced my wife, and spent 6 years planning my destruction. But all I knew in that moment was that his name was Gavin Sinclair. And I had seen him somewhere before. Walter paused. I could hear the rustle of papers on the other end. Then he said a name that meant nothing to me at the time: Gavin Sinclair. I wrote it in my notebook. Gavin Sinclair. "Who is he?" I asked. Walter's voice was cautious. "That's what I need to find out. But Gregory, I think you should see the photo I'm sending now." My phone buzzed. I opened the image, and something in my mind stirred. I had seen that face before. But where? It took me 2 days to remember where I had seen Gavin Sinclair's face. 2 days of staring at that photo, digging through old files, excavating memories I had buried. And when it finally clicked on the morning of August 3rd, 4 days before the hearing, everything became clear. I spent the night of August 2nd awake, sitting at my kitchen table, the photo of Gavin Sinclair open on my phone. I zoomed in on his face, studied his features, tried to place him. Where had I seen him? A client, a vendor, someone at work. The harder I tried, the more elusive the memory became. I made coffee at 2 in the morning, then again at 4. By sunrise, I was exhausted, frustrated, and no closer to an answer. But something about the way he stood in that photo, confident, self-assured, kept nagging at me. I had seen that posture before, that expression. At 7 in the morning, I opened my laptop. I pulled up my old work files, the ones I had backed up before my administrative leave. I searched for anything related to investigations, employee reports, compliance reviews, and then I found it. A report dated May 23, 2018. Subject line: Employee Misconduct. Gavin Sinclair. I opened the file. It was a 12-page compliance report detailing falsified invoices, vendor payments that didn't match internal records. Small amounts at first, but they added up. I had traced the approvals back to Gavin Sinclair, an operations manager in his late 30s. I reviewed the evidence, documented the discrepancies, and filed a report with the compliance director. 2 days later, Gavin was fired. I sat back, staring at the screen. I remembered now. Not clearly, it had been 6 years ago, but enough. I remembered the meeting. Gavin sitting across from me, his face pale, his hands trembling. "Please," he had said. "I have a family. I made a mistake. Don't do this." I had looked at him, this man I barely knew, and I had said, "I'm sorry. I have to report this. It's my job." And I had. Because that's what compliance officers do. We follow the rules. We report the facts. We don't make exceptions. I didn't think about him again after that. He was just another name in a file, another case closed. But Gavin had thought about me for 6 years. I called Gordon immediately. "I know who's behind this," I said, my voice tight. "Gavin Sinclair. He's a former employee I reported in 2018. He was fired. He lost everything. And now he's coming after me." Gordon was silent for a moment. Then he said, "This changes everything. This is conspiracy. This is revenge. We need to document this. I'll contact the district attorney's office." "Can we still win?" I asked. "Absolutely," Gordon said. "This makes our case stronger. It shows motive. It shows premeditation." "Don't worry, Gregory. I'm preparing everything. We're going to nail them." I hung up, feeling relieved. Finally, the pieces were coming together. Finally, we had a narrative. Gavin Sinclair, a disgraced former employee, orchestrates a 6-year revenge plot. He seduces my wife. He manipulates my son. He frames me for instability. And now we had proof. That afternoon, Walter called. He said, his tone serious. "I've been digging deeper. Gavin didn't just target your wife. He targeted your son first." "What?" "The gym where Julian works out," Walter said. Gavin joined 2 months before they accidentally met. He timed his visits to match Julian's schedule. This wasn't opportunistic. This was calculated. I felt a chill run down my spine. He wanted to destroy me. Not just take my money. He wanted to destroy me. "Yes," Walter said. "And he's been working on it for a long time." I sat in silence, absorbing the weight of it. Gavin Sinclair hadn't just found an opportunity. He had planned this, step by step, target by target. He had studied my family the way I used to study compliance reports, methodically, carefully looking for weaknesses, and he had found them. He waited until I had something to lose. I went to Gordon's office that afternoon. He spread the timeline across his desk, dates, names, connections. He pointed to each piece of evidence with confidence. "This is airtight," he said. "We have motive. We have documentation. We have your mother's journal and the recording. The court will see this for what it is, a coordinated attack by a man with a vendetta." In the conservatorship petition, I asked. "We'll get it dismissed," Gordon said. "No question. Once the judge sees the full picture, Gabriel won't have a leg to stand on. Trust me, Gregory, we've got this. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Thank you, I said. Gordon smiled. That's what I'm here for. I left Gordon's office that afternoon, believing I had the upper hand. We had evidence. We had motive. We had a clear picture of a conspiracy. Gordon assured me he was building a bulletproof case. I trusted him. I trusted the legal system. I thought the truth would be enough. But I was slowly learning that trust is a weapon. And I was about to discover I had given it to the wrong person. 3 days after discovering Gavin's identity, I walked into that courtroom on August 6th, believing I finally understood what I was up against. I was wrong. Because the enemy wasn't just outside. He was sitting right next to me. The hearing began at 9 o'clock in the morning at the Fairfax County Courthouse. I sat at the defense table next to Gordon Sutton, my briefcase open, my mother's journal, and the voice recorder inside. Gordon had assured me he would present everything. He had told me we had a strong case. I believed him. Ronald Briggs, Gabrielle's attorney, opened with his argument. He was polished, confident, methodical. He painted a picture of a man, me, who had become unstable, erratic, a danger to himself and others. He cited the HR complaint from February, the suspicious bank transactions from May, the injuries from the parking garage assault in July. Your Honor, Briggs said Mr. Holloway's own employer placed him on administrative leave due to concerns about his mental state. His own family, his wife, his son, have expressed fear for their safety. I glanced at Julian sitting in the gallery behind Gabrielle. He didn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the table, his jaw tight. Gabrielle took the stand. She spoke calmly, tearfully, describing a husband who had grown distant, angry, unpredictable. She showed the court photos of my injuries from the parking garage attack. She presented them as evidence of violent behavior. I don't know what happened to him, she said, her voice breaking. But he's not the man I married. I looked at Gordon. He was taking notes. I waited for him to object, to challenge her testimony, to point out that those injuries were from an attack on me, not by me. He said nothing. Briggs submitted the photos into evidence. No objection, Your Honor, Gordon said. I leaned over and whispered, Gordon, those are from the parking garage. We need to explain. Not yet, Gordon said quietly. Trust me. But he didn't look at me when he said it. His eyes stayed on his notepad. Briggs continued. He submitted the HR email about my alleged erratic behavior. He submitted the bank fraud investigation. He built a timeline of instability piece by piece, and Gordon didn't push back. He didn't object. He didn't cross-examine Gabriel. He just sat there taking notes, nodding occasionally. I felt panic rising in my chest. Gordon, I whispered again. What are you doing? He didn't answer. Then Briggs said, Your Honor, we also have documentation showing that Mr. Holloway's mother recently passed away. We believe this event may have exacerbated his mental decline. I waited for Gordon to present my mother's journal. The recording. The power of attorney signed under duress. That was our defense. That was the proof. Gordon cleared his throat. Your Honor, we'd like to reserve the right to submit additional evidence at a later time. There are some technical issues with the recordings we need to resolve. Technical issues. There were no technical issues. I had played the recording for him 3 times. It was clear. It was damning. I stared at Gordon. He still wouldn't look at me. Judge Beverly Harrington, sitting at the bench, looked at Gordon. She frowned slightly. Then she looked at me. I saw something in her expression, concern maybe, or recognition. Her eyes dropped to my hand, where I was gripping a pen. She stared at the scar on my palm, the burn from 20 years ago. Her gaze lingered there for a long moment. Then she looked back at Gordon. Counsel, are you saying you are not prepared to present your defense today? We are prepared, Your Honor, Gordon said. We simply believe. You believe you need more time, Judge Harrington said, her tone flat. Despite having 3 days to prepare since you took on this case, Gordon shifted in his seat. Yes, Your Honor, Judge Harrington set down her pen. I'm calling a 15-minute recess. The gavel came down. I followed Gordon into the hallway. My hands were shaking. My voice was tight. What are you doing? I said. You're not fighting for me. Gordon stopped walking. He turned to face me, and for the first time I saw it clearly. Not confidence, not competence, guilt, or maybe resignation. Gregory, you didn't object once, I said. You didn't cross-examine her. You didn't submit the recording. What the hell is going on? He opened his mouth, closed it. Then the bailiff called us back into the courtroom. We returned to our seats. Judge Harrington was already at the bench. She didn't look at Gordon. She looked at me. Mr. Holloway, she said, her voice measured. Are you satisfied with your legal representation? The question hung in the air. Gordon went rigid beside me. I felt the weight of everyone's eyes on me. Your Honor? I said carefully, I'm not sure. Judge Harrington nodded slowly. I'm granting a continuance of 48 hours. Mr. Holloway, you have the right to seek alternative counsel. The gavel came down. I turned to Gordon. He wouldn't meet my eyes. And in that moment, I knew. My own lawyer had betrayed me. Gordon looked at me then, not with the confidence he'd shown in his office, but with something else. Guilt, maybe. Or surrender. Before I could say another word, the court clerk called us back. Judge Harrington was ready. And when we returned, she looked straight at me, not at Gordon, but at me, and asked, Mr. Holloway, are you satisfied with your legal representation? The question hung in the air. Gordon stiffened beside me, and I realized she had seen it too. Your Honor, I said carefully, I'm not sure. Judge Harrington nodded slowly. I'm granting a continuance of 48 hours. Mr. Holloway, you have the right to seek alternative counsel. When the gavel fell, I looked at Gordon. He couldn't meet my eyes, and in that moment I knew. My own lawyer had just destroyed my case. I confronted Gordon in the courthouse parking lot. The hearing had just ended. I had 48 hours to find a new lawyer, and I needed to hear him say it. I needed to know if the betrayal I had seen was real. It was 11:30 in the morning. The August heat shimmered off the asphalt. Gordon was walking quickly toward his car, his briefcase swinging at his side, his head down. Gordon, I called out. Wait, we need to talk. He didn't stop. He walked faster. I jogged to catch up, my heart pounding. Gordon, he reached his car, a black sedan, parked in the far corner of the lot, and fumbled with his keys. I grabbed his arm. Why didn't you object? Why didn't you submit my mother's recording? He froze. His eyes stayed on the ground. I said, my voice tight. Answer me. He pulled his arm away. I had my reasons. Oh, what reasons? I said, my voice rising. You're my lawyer. He tried to step around me, but I blocked his path. Tell me the truth. He couldn't look at me. His jaw tightened. His hands trembled. Then my phone rang. I pulled it out of my pocket. Walter's name flashed on the screen. I answered, my eyes still locked on Gordon. Gregory. Walter said, his voice urgent. I have proof. Gordon received a wire transfer, $150,000, from an offshore account. I traced it. It connects to Gavin Sinclair. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. I stared at Gordon. They paid you, didn't they? Gordon's face went pale. His eyes welled up. My daughter, he said, his voice breaking. She has leukemia. The treatment costs. I needed the money. I'm sorry. I felt something crack inside me. You sold me out. For money. I'm sorry, he said again, his voice barely a whisper. I'm so sorry. He turned and walked to his car. He didn't look back. I stood there in the middle of the parking lot, my phone still pressed to my ear, my hands shaking. Gregory. Walter's voice came through the speaker. You still there? I'm here, I said, my voice hollow. I have 48 hours to find a new lawyer, Walter. I know someone, Walter said. Check the Virginia State Bar pro bono list. Elder law specialists. There's a section for attorneys who take emergency cases. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. 48 hours isn't enough time. Just check the list, Walter said. I have a feeling. I drove home in a daze. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was racing. Gordon had been my lawyer, my advocate, the man I had trusted to fight for me, and he had taken a bribe. He had sabotaged my case. He had stood in that courtroom and let Gabrielle's lawyer destroy me without saying a word, because someone had paid him $150,000. I thought about his daughter, leukemia, treatment costs. I understood desperation. I understood the things people do when they're backed into a corner. But understanding didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't change the fact that I had 48 hours to rebuild my entire defense from scratch. I thought about Judge Harrington's question in that courtroom. Are you satisfied with your legal representation? She had seen it. She had noticed Gordon's failures. She had given me a way out. But a way out to whom I had no backup plan, no alternative. Gordon had been my only hope, and he had destroyed it. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table and tried to think. I made a list of everything I needed. A lawyer who understood elder law. Someone who could review the evidence quickly. Someone I could trust. That last one felt impossible. I called 3 law firms from the pro bono list. 2 didn't answer. The third said they couldn't take emergency cases. We need at least 2 weeks to review, the receptionist said. I'm sorry. I hung up and stared at my phone. 2 weeks. I had 48 hours. I thought about representing myself. But I knew nothing about conservatorship law. Nothing about courtroom procedure. I would walk in there and Gabrielle's lawyer would tear me apart. Again. By evening, I was sitting in my car in the driveway. I couldn't go inside. The house felt like enemy territory. Gabrielle was probably there planning her next move, or maybe she was with Gavin celebrating their victory. I pulled out my phone and searched again Virginia State Bar pro bono elder law. The list appeared. Names I didn't recognize. Law firms I had never heard of. I scrolled through, my vision blurring with exhaustion. How was I supposed to choose? How was I supposed to trust anyone after this? Gordon had looked competent. Gordon had looked trustworthy. And Gordon had sold me out for $150,000. How could I know the next person wouldn't do the same? My phone battery dropped to 23%. The hearing was in 2 days, and I had never felt more alone. I thought about my mother, about the journal she left, about the recordings she made. She had fought for me even after she was gone. She had trusted me to find the truth, and I had. But what good was the truth if I couldn't present it? What good was evidence if I had no one to speak for me? Then my phone rang. It was 11 o'clock at night. An unknown number. I stared at the screen. My first instinct was to ignore it. Spam call, wrong number, another dead end. But something made me hesitate. A feeling I couldn't name, a whisper in the back of my mind that said answer it. I pressed the green button. Hello, a woman's voice came through the line. Calm, professional, steady. Mr. Holloway, my name is Wendy Harrington, and what she said next would change everything. The call came at 11 o'clock on the night of August 7th, 33 hours before the next hearing. I was sitting in my car outside a McDonald's, too exhausted to drive home, but too wired to sleep. An unknown number. I almost sent it to voicemail. But something made me answer. Hello, Mr. Holloway. A woman's voice. Calm, professional. My name is Wendy Harrington. I'm an attorney specializing in elder law. I sat up straighter. How did you get my number? I saw your case in the court filings, she said. Public record. I want to help you. Pro bono. I felt a flicker of suspicion. Why would you help me? I can't pay you. I could barely afford Gordon, and he... I stopped. I know about Gordon Sutton, she said. I know he withdrew from your case this afternoon. You have 33 hours left. That you've been following my case. Not just your case, Mr. Holloway. I've been looking for you for a long time. I frowned. I don't understand. She paused. Then she said, 20 years ago. Route 50, a car accident. March of 2006. My heart stopped. My breath caught. The memory flooded back rain flames, a young woman slumped against the steering wheel. The heat. The panic. The burn on my hand. You were the girl in the car, I said slowly. I was 18, she said. You pulled me out. Your hand got burned. You said, now you're safe. And then you left before I could thank you. I couldn't speak. I sat there in the darkness of the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel with one hand, the phone pressed to my ear with the other. How did you find me? I finally managed. I never stopped looking, she said. My mother, Judge Beverly Harrington, she kept the accident report. Witness descriptions. The scar on your hand. When I saw the courtroom sketches from your hearing yesterday, I recognized it. I checked your name. Gregory Holloway. I checked your age. 57. The numbers matched. Your mother is the judge in my case. Yes, Wendy said. But she doesn't know I'm calling you. She can't know. It would compromise her position. This is my decision, Mr. Holloway. You saved my life. Let me help save yours. I felt something crack open inside me. Not despair this time. Something else. The hearing is in 33 hours, I said. I know, she said. Can you meet me tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock? I need to review everything. I have evidence, I said. My mother's journal, a recording. Bring it all, she said. We'll prepare. And Gregory, she paused. Thank you for that night. I never got to say it. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do, she said. Now let me make sure you get the same chance you gave me. A chance to survive. The call ended. I sat there in the McDonald's parking lot staring at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. The girl I had pulled from a burning car 20 years ago was now a lawyer. She had spent 2 decades looking for me, and she was offering to save me. I thought about that night. March 2006. I had been on my way home from the hospital where my mother had just suffered her first stroke. I had seen the wreckage. I had stopped. I had pulled her out. I had burned my hand. And then I had left because I didn't have time to wait for the police. I had a mother to care for. I had responsibilities. I never thought about her again. She was just a face I saw for 30 seconds in the worst moment of her life. I didn't know her name. I didn't know what happened to her. I just knew she survived, but she had thought about me for 20 years, and now she was here. I started the car. It was 11:15. 7 o'clock in the morning was less than 8 hours away. I needed to go home. I needed to gather the evidence. I needed to prepare. But first I sat there for a moment longer, letting the weight of it all settle over me. 2 weeks ago, I had been a man with a career, a family, a life. Now I had nothing. My accounts were frozen. My job was gone. My wife had turned against me. My son didn't believe me. I had been framed, sabotaged, betrayed. But I also had something I hadn't had before. I had hope. I drove home slowly, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind racing. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. Gabrielle's car was gone, probably at Gavin's. I didn't care anymore. I went inside and gathered everything. My mother's journal, the voice recorder, the power of attorney document, the medical records, the timeline Walter had helped me piece together. I spread it all out on the kitchen table and took photos of every page. I backed everything up to the cloud. I wasn't taking any chances. At 3 in the morning, I finally lay down on the couch. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, replaying the conversation with Wendy in my mind. You saved my life. Let me help save yours. I didn't know if it was fate, coincidence, or something else. But I knew one thing I wasn't going to refuse. At 7 o'clock in the morning, I would meet Wendy Harrington, and together we would fight. I sat there in the McDonald's parking lot, the phone in my hand, and I cried. Not from despair this time. From something I had almost forgotten, hope. The girl I had saved 20 years ago was now a lawyer. She had spent 2 decades looking for me, and she was offering to save me in return. I didn't know if it was fate, coincidence, or something else, but I knew one thing I wasn't going to refuse. I started the car. 7 o'clock would arrive in 8 hours. I had work to do. Before I reveal what happened in that courtroom, I need to know you're still with me. If you've made it this far, drop the number 50 in the comments right now. Let me see how many of you are ready for the truth. And a quick reminder, the story ahead contains dramatized elements that may not reflect every detail exactly as it occurred. If you'd prefer to stop here, feel free to close this video now. But if you're ready to see how justice unfolds, let's walk into that courtroom together. When Wendy Harrington walked into that courtroom at 8:55 on the morning of August 9th, every eye turned toward her. She was 36 years old, professional, confident. But the person who looked most shocked wasn't Gabriel. It wasn't even me. It was Judge Beverly Harrington. I stood as Wendy approached the defense table. She wore a dark blue suit, her hair pulled back, her expression calm and focused. She carried a leather briefcase in one hand and a slim folder in the other. "Mr. Holloway," she said quietly, setting the briefcase down. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I can be," I said. She nodded. "Trust me, we're going to be okay." At 9 o'clock, the bailiff announced, "All rise." Judge Beverly Harrington entered the courtroom. She took her seat at the bench, her expression neutral, professional. She glanced at the defense table at me, and then her eyes moved to Wendy. Wendy stood. "Your Honor, I am Wendy Harrington, representing Mr. Gregory Holloway." The judge froze. Her eyes widened. For a moment, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. "You, Harrington," the judge said slowly. "Yes, Your Honor," Wendy said, her voice steady. The judge set down her pen. She looked at Wendy, then at me, then back at Wendy. "Counsel, I must disclose that you are my daughter. I had no knowledge that you would be representing Mr. Holloway until this moment." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Gabrielle's lawyer, Ronald Briggs, leaned over and whispered something to her. Gabrielle's face went pale. Judge Harrington turned to both sides. "This is an unusual situation. Does either party object to my continuing to preside over this case?" Ronald Briggs glanced at Gabrielle. She shook her head slightly. Objecting would make her look suspicious. She couldn't afford that. "No objection, Your Honor," Briggs said. The judge looked at me. "Mr. Holloway." "No objection, Your Honor," I said. "Very well," the judge said. "The record will reflect this disclosure. Miss Harrington, you may proceed." Wendy opened her folder. She was methodical, professional, precise. She laid out the timeline of transactions from my mother's accounts. $180,000 withdrawn over 8 months. She submitted the power of attorney signed in March of 2024 with my mother's shaky signature at the bottom. "Your Honor," Wendy said, The medical records submitted show that Mrs. Lillian Holloway was experiencing significant cognitive impairment on the day this document was signed. Her physician's notes specifically state, "Patient experiencing increased confusion. Not recommended for legal decision-making." She paused. Then she said, "I'd like to play a recording." The courtroom fell silent. Wendy pressed play on a small device connected to the courtroom's audio system. My mother's voice filled the room, weak, trembling, confused. "I don't understand. Why do you need this?" Then Gabrielle's voice, calm and patient. "Just trust me, Lillian. It's for Gregory's benefit. If you don't sign, it'll cause problems for him." "But I don't. I'm very confused today. Can we wait?" "No, we can't wait. The bank needs it today." The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Gabrielle. Her face had lost all color. Ronald Briggs was whispering urgently to her, but she didn't respond. She just stared at the table in front of her. Julian, sitting in the gallery behind Gabrielle, looked stunned. He stared at his mother, his mouth slightly open, as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Wendy continued, "Mrs. Gabrielle Holloway did not act alone, Your Honor. I'd like to introduce evidence regarding an individual named Gavin Sinclair." She displayed a photo on the courtroom monitor. Gavin Sinclair, 43 years old, clean-cut, confident. "Gavin Sinclair is not merely Mrs. Holloway's paramour," Wendy said. "He is a former employee whom Mr. Holloway reported for fraudulent conduct in 2018. Mr. Sinclair was terminated, his life unraveled, and he spent 6 years planning his revenge." She clicked to the next slide. A timeline. February 2023. Gavin joins the gym where Julian Holloway works out. March 2023, Gavin approaches Julian. May 2023, Gavin meets Gabrielle at a charity gala. This was not opportunistic. "Your Honor," Wendy said, "this was calculated. Mr. Sinclair targeted Mr. Holloway's son first, then his wife, then his mother's finances, and finally he bribed Mr. Holloway's original attorney, Gordon Sutton, to sabotage his defense. She submitted bank records, a wire transfer, $150,000 from an offshore account linked to Gavin Sinclair to Gordon Sutton. This is not a conservatorship case, Your Honor," Wendy said. "This is a premeditated act of revenge, elder abuse, and fraud." Gabrielle stood abruptly. "That's not—" "Sit down, Mrs. Holloway." Judge Harrington said, her voice sharp. Gabrielle sat. Julian stood. He didn't say anything. He just walked out of the courtroom, his footsteps echoing in the silence. I watched him go, my heart breaking all over again. But this time it was different. This time he had heard the truth. Judge Harrington reviewed the documents in front of her. She looked at the recording transcript. She looked at the bank records. She looked at the power of attorney. Then she looked at me, then at Gabrielle. The courtroom was silent. Gabrielle's face had no color left. Ronald Briggs was frantically whispering to her, but she wasn't listening. And Julian, my son, had just walked out, finally seeing the truth. Judge Harrington set her pen down with a definitive click. She looked at me, and for just a moment I saw something in her eyes. Not pity, recognition, maybe respect. Then she spoke. "I've heard enough. I'm ready to deliver my ruling." Judge Harrington didn't speak immediately. She sat there looking at the evidence spread before her, then at Gabrielle, then at the empty chair where my son had been sitting. And when she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute authority. "Mrs. Holloway," she said, "you have asked this court to declare your husband legally incompetent. What I see instead is a systematic attempt to exploit a vulnerable elderly woman, Mr. Holloway's late mother, and to weaponize the legal system against a man whose only fault was doing his job with integrity." Gabrielle's face went white. She gripped the edge of the table. "This petition is dismissed," Judge Harrington said, "with prejudice." Gabrielle collapsed into her chair. Ronald Briggs leaned over, whispering urgently, but she didn't respond. She just stared at the table, tears streaming down her face. Judge Harrington continued. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into potential criminal charges, including elder abuse fraud and conspiracy. Gabrielle's tears came faster. Crocodile tears, I thought. Tears born not from remorse, but from the realization that she had been caught. The court also notes the clear involvement of Mr. Gavin Sinclair and the alleged bribery of an attorney, which will be referred to the appropriate Bar Association for investigation, Judge Harrington said. Mr. Holloway, you have been underestimated for far too long. That ends today. She paused. Then carefully she said, 20 years ago someone told my daughter, now you're safe. 3 words. They saved her life. She looked at Wendy, then back at me. I never had the chance to thank that person. But I never forgot. Justice should protect those who act without need for recognition, those who do the right thing even when no one is watching. A subtle nod in my direction. The gavel came down. This hearing is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, I stood alone on the stone steps. The August sun was warm on my face. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Wendy approached her briefcase in hand. We did it, she said. You did it, I said. Thank you. No, she said. You did it 20 years ago. I just returned the favor. I looked at her. Your mother. Did she know? Wendy smiled faintly. I think she suspected when she saw your scar. But she didn't know I would be here today. That was my decision. I don't know how to repay you. You already did, Wendy said. Route 50, March 2006. We're even. She extended her hand. I shook it. What happens now? I asked. The DA will open an investigation, she said. Adult Protective Services is already involved. Gabrielle and Gavin will likely face charges. It'll take time, but justice will come. And my accounts, sure, the freeze will be lifted within 48 hours, she said. Your job, I can't promise anything, but with this ruling, you have grounds to contest your suspension. I nodded. Thank you, Wendy, for everything. She smiled. Take care of yourself, Gregory, and if you ever need anything, you have my number. She walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I stood there for a long moment, watching people pass by. Lawyers, families, defendants, witnesses, all of them navigating their own battles. I had been one of them. And now finally, I wasn't. 3 days later, August 11, 2024, I sat in a coffee shop in Arlington at 3 in the afternoon. It was a quiet place tucked into a corner near Old Town. I had chosen it because it was neutral ground. No memories, no history. Julian walked in at 3:15. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, his hair disheveled, like he hadn't slept in days. He saw me and hesitated. Then he walked over and sat down across from me. Dad, he said, I need to talk. Silence. I found Mom's texts with Gavin, he said, his voice breaking. I read everything. The plan, the money, the way they used me. He paused, swallowing hard. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it would go this far. I looked at my son, really looked at him. I saw the guilt, the shame, the boy who had once asked me to fix his bike, the teenager who had called me when he got his first flat tire, the man who had stood in a courtroom and testified that I was dangerous. You were manipulated, Julian, I said quietly. Gavin targeted you because you were vulnerable. Your gambling debt, I didn't know about it. I was stupid. Julian said, tears streaming down his face. I needed money. Gavin seemed like a friend. And then Mom. Mom said you were dangerous, that you were going to hurt Grandma. I believed her. She's your mother, I said. You trusted her. That's not your fault. But I testified against you, Julian said. I stood there and said you were a danger. You were scared, I said. You were in debt. You thought you were protecting your mother. Can you ever forgive me? He asked. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I was angry, but because forgiveness, real forgiveness, doesn't happen in one conversation. It happens over time. It happens in small moments. A phone call, a shared meal, a choice to show up even when it's hard. Yes, I finally said, but it will take effort from both of us. Julian looked up, his eyes red. And for the first time in months, I saw something I thought I had lost forever, my son. Not the man who had testified against me, but the boy who had once asked me to fix his bike. The teenager who had called me when he got his first flat tire. My son. And that was worth fighting for. Healing doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It comes in small moments. A phone call from Julian. A morning without fear. A choice to speak instead of staying silent. It took 6 months for Gabrielle and Gavin to be sentenced. It took longer for the rest of us to find our way back. 6 months after the trial, Gabrielle and Gavin were formally charged. Christine Wallace, the assistant district attorney, led the prosecution. Gavin tried to cooperate with the DA to reduce his sentence, offering evidence against Gabrielle betraying her the way he had betrayed everyone else. Gabrielle refused the first plea deal, then the second. Eventually, the evidence was too strong. She accepted. Gabrielle received 3 years in prison, no suspension, plus restitution of $180,000 and a permanent ban from serving as a fiduciary. Gavin received 5 years for conspiracy, elder abuse, assault, and bribery. Our divorce was finalized in Virginia. I kept the house in McLean. She sold assets to pay restitution. 3 months later, I was reinstated at work. Rebecca Norton from HR greeted me on my first day back. Welcome back, Gregory. We missed you. Stanley Crawford, my mentor, pulled me aside later that week. I should have known better, he said. I'm sorry for doubting you. It's okay, I said. They were convincing. Still, he said, I should have trusted you. I shook his hand. Thank you. Around the same time, Julian started therapy, gambling addiction counseling. He paid off his $50,000 debt with my help. This isn't a loan, I told him. It's a gift. You're my son. I'll pay you back, he said. Focus on living better, I said. That's repayment enough. A year after the trial, Julian and I decided to sell my mother's house in Alexandria. One afternoon in August, we went together to clean it out. The house was full of her books, her photographs, the sweater she wore every winter. We worked in silence for hours, packing boxes, sorting through decades of memories. In the attic, we found an old photo album. I opened it and saw a picture I hadn't looked at in years. Me at 32, holding newborn Julian in the hospital. I was smiling. He was wrapped in a blue blanket, his eyes closed. His tiny hand curled around my finger. Julian looked over my shoulder. He stared at the photo for a long time. Then he said, his voice breaking, "Did I really mean this much to you?" I took the photo and held it carefully. "You still do." He wiped his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Dad." "I know," I said, "and I forgive you. Every day I choose to forgive you." He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "I don't deserve that." "Maybe not," I said, "but you're my son, and that's not something that changes." We stood there in the empty attic, surrounded by boxes and dust and memories, and we held each other. Father and son. Broken, but healing. Later, as we carried the last boxes to the car, I thought about my mother, about the journal she left, about the recording she made, about the way she protected me even after she was gone. She had known what was coming. She had prepared. She had trusted me to find the truth. And I had. Because of her. 3 months later, the restitution from Gabrielle was completed. $180,000 returned to my mother's estate, which I inherited. I donated $50,000 to an elder abuse prevention charity in my mother's name. The plaque read, "In memory of Lillian Holloway." In December, 16 months after the trial, I was invited to speak at a Northern Virginia elder law conference. It was the first time I had spoken publicly about what happened. Judge Beverly Harrington and Wendy were in the audience. I didn't know they would be there. I stood at the podium, nervous. My name is Gregory Holloway. I'm 58 years old, and 18 months ago my wife tried to have me declared legally incompetent. I told a condensed version of my story: the petition, the betrayal, my mother's journal, the trial, the vindication. Silence can be strength, I said. But silence can also be a weapon others use against you. For years, I believed staying silent would keep the peace. I was wrong. Silence gave others the power to speak for me, to lie about me, to erase me. I paused. My mother taught me something before she passed. She left it in her journal: "Don't let silence become your prison." She was right. Wisdom is knowing when to keep peace and when to let truth speak. After the talk, Judge Harrington approached. "Well done, Mr. Holloway." "Judge Harrington," I said, "I didn't know you'd be here." She smiled. "I wouldn't have missed it. My daughter wanted me to come." Wendy joined us. "You did great, Gregory." Julian was there too, in the back row, clapping. That evening, I returned to my new apartment. Smaller than the McLean house, but mine. I made coffee the way my mother used to, 2 sugars, a little cream. I sat by the window and watched the sun set over Virginia. I had lost a wife. I had nearly lost a son. I had lost my mother. But I had also found something. I found my voice. I'm telling you this story now in February of 2026 because someone asked me to. Someone who thought others might need to hear it. If you're listening to this, and you've ever been pushed aside, underestimated, or quietly erased by people who thought you wouldn't fight back, know this: your silence is not weakness, but it doesn't have to be your only weapon. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let the truth be heard. My son and I had dinner last week. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about his new job, his plans, his future. He's 26 now. He calls me every Sunday. That's enough. Judge Harrington retired last month. Wendy Harrington still practices elder law. She saves people every day. And me, I'm 59 years old. I drink coffee the way my mother did. I work. I speak when I need to. I stay silent when I choose. The difference is now it's my choice. I choose when to hold my peace and when to let my truth ring out. That's not just healing. That's freedom. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Before we close this chapter together, I want to leave you with something that might help if you ever find yourself where I was voiceless, unseen, fighting battles no one else could see. Looking back on my family story, I see the mistakes I made clearly now. I stayed silent when I should have spoken. I trusted when I should have questioned. I believed peace was worth any price. Don't be like me. Don't wait until your life is on fire to find your voice. Silence isn't always wisdom. Sometimes it's just fear wearing a disguise. This family story taught me that love can be weaponized, that the people closest to you can become strangers, that dad revenge isn't always about fighting back. Sometimes it's about outlasting the storm and refusing to let bitterness define you. My dad revenge was choosing forgiveness over fury. It was rebuilding when they expected me to crumble. It was speaking my testimony when they thought I'd stay silent forever. I'm not a religious man, but I believe God puts people in our paths for a reason. Sometimes it's to test us. Sometimes it's to save us. Wendy Harrington was both. 20 years after I pulled her from that fire, she pulled me from mine. That wasn't coincidence. That was grace. If you're in a situation like mine, if someone is trying to erase you, silence you, discredit you, document everything, find people who will listen, Don't assume the system will protect you. It won't unless you fight for it. And don't carry the weight alone. I almost did. It nearly destroyed me. My final thought. Your family story might not have a courtroom. Your dad revenge might not have a judge. But it will have moments where you choose stay silent or speak up. Both have consequences. Choose the one you can live with. If this story resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Have you ever felt silenced or underestimated? Subscribe to this channel for more stories that matter and share this with someone who might need to hear it. Your support means everything. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I know it wasn't easy. Before you go, a final note. The stories you'll hear on this channel may contain creative elements crafted for educational and reflective purposes. If that's not for you, feel free to explore other content that suits you better. No judgment, just honesty. Thank you again. And remember, your voice matters. Use it wisely.